A billionaire's deaf son hears for the first time, not through science, but through the touch of a barefoot street girl. "I can make you hear," the barefoot girl, now named Lily, murmured, her voice trembling like the ripples in the fountain behind her. In the courtyard of Sterling Corporation, the marble floors shimmered under the golden sun, carrying the scent of power and pride. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire behind the empire, strode past the fountain, eyes glued to his phone, barely glancing at his 10-year-old son, Leo, who sat quietly on a bench. Deaf since toddlerhood, Leo lived in silence, his father's voice only a moving blur. Then, out of nowhere, appeared Lily, a frail, barefoot girl clutching a small tray of faded flowers and wooden carvings. Security would have chased her off, but destiny had other plans. Their eyes met, his lonely and distant, hers wild and filled with strange understanding. She lifted her hand and signed, "Hi." For the first time in years, Leo's face lit up. Someone spoke his language, but then he frowned and rubbed his ear. "Itches," he signed. Lily knelt beside him, studying his ear. "Don't move," she whispered. Slowly, she reached out and pulled out something small, dark, and squirming. Leo gasped. Then the world erupted. The sound of honking cars, footsteps, voices, everything crashed into him at once. He screamed, hearing his own voice for the first time. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You heard that?" she whispered. For the first time in 8 years, silence shattered. In a courtyard built on wealth and pride, a barefoot stranger had just given a boy what money never could, his hearing. Arthur stood frozen, his phone slipping from his hand. When Leo cried, "Dad," his voice shaky but real, time seemed to stop. Then fury took over. Arthur rushed forward, pulling his son away. "Stay away from him," he roared. "Guards!" But before anyone could move, Leo shouted again, louder this time. "Don't hurt her." Arthur froze. The sound of his son's voice, raw, real, alive, cut deeper than anything he'd ever felt. For 10 long years, he had begged for this miracle. He'd poured fortunes into experts, devices, and promises that led nowhere. Yet, a barefoot street girl had done in moments what science never could. At the hospital, confusion filled the air, flashing monitors, rushing doctors, the smell of antiseptic. Arthur stood behind the glass, watching as white coats surrounded Leo. His hands shook, not from fear, but from guilt that burned deep. The head doctor entered, clipboard in hand, his tone smooth and rehearsed. "An extraordinary case, Mr. Sterling. The blockage was removed. We expect temporary improvement." "Temporary?" Arthur's voice was sharp. "A girl from the street fixed what your entire team couldn't in 8 years. And you call it temporary?" The doctor looked down, adjusting his glasses. "We followed standard procedures." "Procedures," Arthur muttered, voice cracking. "You took my money, promised results, and never even checked his ear." Lily stepped forward, her voice steady but fierce. "They didn't care to look. To them, he was just your son, not a child, but a case. A name with a price tag." Arthur turned toward her, anger flickering, then fading into something heavier. Realization. The doctor sighed, sliding a folder across the desk. "You should read this." Inside were reports stamped and signed pages declaring Leo's condition permanent, but one line froze him cold. Asterisk maintained diagnosis to ensure continued funding. Sterling's account approved. Arthur's breath caught. They had profited from his son's silence. His fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. "You used him," he whispered. "You sold my son's silence." He ripped the papers apart, the sound cutting through the sterile air. Lily stood still, her eyes filled with quiet fury and pity. And for the first time, Arthur Sterling, the man who built machines to connect the world, finally understood what real deafness was. Not silence of sound, but silence of the heart. He sat beside Leo's bed, watching the boy trace his father's wrist, feeling the rhythm of life, like he could sense sound through touch. "You're safe now," Arthur murmured, though his voice trembled. "I'll make this right. I swear. Leo turned his head, eyes wide and searching. His lips moved slowly, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Not your fault," he said, the words fragile but full of meaning. Arthur's chest tightened. For years, he had believed that money could replace love, that paying for experts was the same as being there. But now, in the quiet hum of the hospital room, he finally saw the truth. His son's silence had only mirrored his own. Near the doorway, Lily stood quietly, her hands still faintly stained from what she had pulled from Leo's ear. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her calm presence reflected back everything Arthur had refused to see. Not the powerful businessman he was, but the father he had failed to be. He turned toward her. "How did you even know? What made you look?" Lily met his gaze, her voice gentle but firm. "Because I saw him, not his name or your money." Everyone else looked past the boy. I didn't. Her words struck deep, soft, but sharp as truth. Arthur let out a slow breath. "You're just a kid. How do you talk like you've lived through a lifetime?" She gave a faint shrug. "When you grow up on the streets, you learn to hear what others ignore." The room fell silent, except for the steady rhythm of Leo's breathing. For the first time, Arthur understood. Silence wasn't emptiness. It was space to truly listen. He brushed his hand through his son's hair. "I've been deaf, too," he whispered. That night, as the city lights flickered outside the window, Arthur made a promise, not to his empire, but to his child. He would destroy every system that thrived on pain. He would stop buying hope and start fighting for what was real. Because for the first time, Arthur Sterling finally heard, not through his ears, but through the voice of a barefoot girl who had taught him that wealth could build towers, but only love could break silence. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The world outside felt heavier, colder. Arthur walked out of the hospital beside Lily and Leo. The boy clung to his father's sleeve, flinching at each distant siren, the strange, overwhelming sound of life returning. Inside the car, quiet filled the space again. Arthur stared out the tinted window, seeing not his reflection, but the man he hoped to become. Across from him, Lily sat silently, her hands still bearing the marks of the miracle that had changed them all. He wanted to thank her, to find words that could hold the weight of what she had done, but nothing he could say felt enough. When they got home, Leo wouldn't leave Lily's side. He followed her into the kitchen, the garden, even sat beside her when exhaustion stole her voice. She didn't treat him like a miracle, just a child finally awake to the world. From the hallway, Arthur watched them, his heart tangled between gratitude and guilt. Later that evening, as the golden glow of sunset filled the room, he found Lily by the window, staring out at the city skyline. "Why did you help him?" he asked softly. "You didn't even know us." Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened. "Because no one helped my brother," she said quietly. "He lost his hearing from an infection. The clinic turned us away because we had no money. I know what it feels like when pain becomes worthless to the world." The truth in her words struck him deeper than anger ever could. Arthur's jaw tightened. "Then help me fix this," he said. "Not with money, with truth." Lily turned toward him, her expression gentle. "Start by listening to your son," she whispered. That night, Arthur sat beside Leo's bed. The boy lay awake, tracing invisible shapes in the air. "What do you hear?" Arthur asked softly. Leo smiled faintly, his voice unsteady but full of wonder. "Everything." Arthur's chest ached as he pulled his son close. "Then you'll never face silence again. Not while I'm here." Outside, the wind swept through the city. Lily stepped out into the night, her figure fading into the dark like a prayer set free. Arthur watched her go, realizing the girl who had nothing had given him everything: purpose, truth, and the will to listen. Days later, the story had spread across the country. The miracle at Sterling Corporation, they called it. But to Arthur, it wasn't a miracle, it was an awakening. He stood once more outside the hospital, the place where he had once signed checks instead of asking questions. This time, he signed something different, a legal order launching an investigation into the network that had profited from his son's suffering. The men in suits begged for leniency, their voices polished and empty, but Arthur's reply was steady and unshakable, no longer the voice of a billionaire, but of a father who had finally learned to hear. "You turned my son's silence into profit," Arthur said calmly. "Now the world will hear what you tried to hide." Across the room, Leo sat sketching on his notepad, his laughter light and uneven, but filled with joy. Every sound he made was a quiet rebellion against the years of silence he'd endured. Outside, Lily walked alone down the damp street, her bare feet leaving faint prints on the pavement as she prepared to fade back into the world that had once ignored her. Arthur's tone softened. "You gave me back my son," he said. "How can I ever repay you?" Lily smiled, eyes warm. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Sterling. Just keep listening to him and to the voices the world chooses not to hear." Then she turned, her shadow stretching long beneath the rising Sunday. As the first light touched the city, Arthur finally understood. Wealth could raise towers, but only compassion could build bridges. He had spent his life chasing power, only to discover that the greatest strength came from listening. Sometimes, hearing isn't about the ears, it's about the heart. When we look beyond status, pride, and wealth, we rediscover what it means to be human. A single act of kindness can spark truth, heal pain, and return someone's voice to the world.